Section 1. A portrait of loss, more than just markets. This is where the abstract numbers of economic collapse become painfully, intimately real. It's a story written not in stock tickers, but on the faces of ordinary people. A man sits on a wooden crate, his shoulders slumped under the weight of an invisible burden. He is one of millions, a face in a crowd of the unemployed, his identity stripped down to a single stark reality. He stares at a closed factory gate, its cold iron bars, a cruel symbol of a world shut down. This gate, once the entrance to his livelihood, is now a monument to his obsolescence. The padlock is not just metal, it's a final, unyielding verdict on his skills, his dedication, his entire working life. His coat is thin, a flimsy shield against the biting wind and the creeping chill of despair. His shoes are worn, the leather cracked from countless miles walked in a fruitless search for a job that no longer exists. Behind him, a woman folds a shawl around a child. Her gesture is one of quiet defiance, a small act of warmth and protection in a world that has grown cold and unforgiving. There is no work today. The silence of the factories is deafening, a stark contrast to the hum of machinery that once promised prosperity and a stable future. There may be no work for a long time. This uncertainty is a corrosive force, eating away at savings, at dignity, and at hope itself. This is not a market chart, it is a family, bound together not just by love, but by a shared struggle for survival. This kind of scene was tragically common in the 1930s. From the industrial heartlands of America to the farming communities of the plains, the story was the same. The Great Depression was not only about finance, it was a profound social and psychological crisis that reached into every corner of society. It was an event that broke apart families, forcing fathers and sons to ride the rails in search of migrant work, leaving behind a void in the heart of the home. It shattered faith in institutions. The banks, once pillars of the community, became symbols of betrayal, their closed doors locking away the life savings of millions. It fundamentally reshaped the world, planting the seeds of political upheaval and setting the stage for conflicts that would define the 20th century. But at its core, it was a story lived not in ledgers or in parliamentary debates. It was lived in kitchens, where mothers stretched meager rations to feed their children. It was lived on street corners, where the unemployed gathered, sharing rumors of work and scraps of news, clinging to a fragile sense of community. It was lived in the hearts of millions whose lives were altered by forces they could not control, their individual dreams sacrificed on the altar of a global economic failure. The Great Depression stands as a stark monument in modern history, a chilling reminder of the human cost when systems fail and compassion is forgotten. The roar of the 1920s, a symphony of jazz, industry, and seemingly endless prosperity, came to a sudden, deafening halt in the autumn of 1929. For years, the nation had been riding a wave of unprecedented economic growth. New technologies like the automobile and radio were transforming daily life, and the stock market, once the exclusive domain of the wealthy, now beckoned to ordinary people with the promise of quick riches. It felt like the party would never end. But this decade of unbridled optimism and rampant speculation was built on a fragile foundation. It was a glittering tower of debt and inflated values, and it was about to crash violently into reality. On October 24th, Black Thursday, the first tremors of panic shook Wall Street. A record 12.9 million shares were traded as prices plummeted. A brief fragile calm was restored when a consortium of powerful bankers intervened, buying up stocks to restore confidence. But it was a temporary fix. The fear was too deep. 5 days later, on Black Tuesday, the floor fell out completely. The selling frenzy was unstoppable. 16 million shares were sold in a single day, a record that would stand for nearly 40 years. Fortunes built over years, even generations, were wiped out in a matter of hours. The dream of easy wealth became the nightmare of instant poverty. And it wasn't just for the wealthy investors. The shockwave rippled outwards, touching everyone. A key accelerant was the widespread practice of buying stocks on margin, borrowing money to invest. This amplified gains on the way up, but it magnified losses catastrophically on the way down. As prices fell, brokers issued margin calls, demanding repayment. This turned falling prices into forced selling. Investors had to sell their stocks at any price to cover their debts, creating a vicious vortex of liquidation that dragged the entire market lower and lower. In a matter of weeks, the crisis jumped from Wall Street to Main Street, infecting the very heart of the American economy. The banking system. Many banks had not only invested their own assets in the stock market, but had also made risky loans to speculators. When the market crashed, those loans went bad, and the bank's own investments became worthless. Whispers of insolvency turned into a roar of public fear. People rushed to withdraw their life savings, creating a devastating wave of bank runs. Thousands of banks, unable to meet the demand, were forced to shut their doors forever. In that era, there was no federal deposit insurance. When a bank failed, savings simply vanished. For ordinary families who had trusted the banks with their futures, the result was catastrophic. Their security, their dreams, their children's inheritance all gone. With savings gone and credit frozen, people stopped spending. They bought only the barest essentials. Consumer demand collapsed. Faced with overflowing inventories and no customers, businesses were forced to cut costs. The first and worst casualty was jobs. A cruel feedback loop took hold. Layoffs fed into less spending, which in turn fed into more business failures and even more layoffs. In a misguided attempt to protect American industries, the government passed the Smoot-Hawley tariffs, which triggered swift retaliation from other nations. Global trade seized up, strangling the world economy. As if the economic disaster wasn't enough, nature itself seemed to turn against the people. A severe drought, combined with years of unsustainable farming practices, birthed the Dust Bowl on the Great Plains. Topsoil turned to dust and blew away in terrifying black blizzards, forcing hundreds of thousands of families to migrate in despair, seeking a survival that was nowhere guaranteed. For millions of Americans, the Great Depression wasn't a distant headline. It was a daily, grinding reality that invaded their homes and broke their spirits. The optimism of the Roaring Twenties had evaporated, replaced by a pervasive sense of dread. This wasn't just an economic crisis, it was a profound psychological one, chipping away at the very foundation of personal and national identity. For men, who were culturally defined by their role as breadwinners, unemployment was more than a loss of income. The humiliation of not being able to provide for their families was a devastating blow to their sense of identity and self-worth. A quiet, corrosive despair settled over households, as fathers who once stood tall now struggled to meet the eyes of their own children. Men who had proudly worked their whole lives as craftsmen, factory workers, and professionals found themselves standing in breadlines, waiting for a simple piece of bread and a bowl of soup. These lines stretched for blocks, a silent testament to the scale of the disaster. Each man in that queue was a story of a life upended, forced to accept charity for what was often the only meal of the day. This shame seeped into family life like a quiet poison, straining marriages and silencing conversations. The four walls of home, once a sanctuary, became a pressure cooker of anxiety and unspoken resentment. To save money, families crowded into small apartments or doubled up with relatives. Privacy became a forgotten luxury as multiple generations crammed into spaces designed for a few, adding another layer of stress to an already unbearable situation. Feeling like burdens, many men left their homes to look for work, anywhere. They joined a drifting, transient army of the unemployed, riding freight trains across the country, hoping for a day's labor in a field or on a construction site. For countless families, a father's departure was a final, desperate act. Many never returned. Wives and mothers were left to fend for themselves and their children, with almost no social safety net to catch them. They became the unwavering anchors of the family, demonstrating incredible resilience. Mothers took any work they could find, taking in laundry, cleaning the houses of those more fortunate, or working grueling hours in canneries, all for paltry wages. Their meager earnings, often just pennies a day, were frequently the only thing that kept their families from complete destitution, putting food on the table and keeping a roof, however precarious, over their heads. The crisis stole the childhoods of an entire generation. Children dropped out of school to work in factories, fields, or shining shoes on street corners. Malnutrition became rampant, leading to a rise in diseases like rickets and tuberculosis. The future of the nation's youth was being mortgaged for the survival of the present. When even these desperate efforts weren't enough, the final humiliation arrived. Eviction. Families saw their entire lives, their furniture, their keepsakes, their dignity, piled onto the curb for all to see. With nowhere else to go, many migrated to the edges of cities, building makeshift shelters from scrap wood, tin, and cardboard. These grim settlements became known as Hoovervilles, a bitter jab at the president they blamed for their plight. They stood as a stark, visible reminder of the nation's widespread suffering and the catastrophic failure of the government to provide adequate relief for its own people. By 1932, the nation chose Franklin D. Roosevelt and a New Deal. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Relief came first. FARA aid and the CCC put young men to work. They planted trees, built trails, fought fires, and sent pay home. Recovery. PWA and WPA built roads, bridges, schools, airports, and dams. The AAA paid farmers to produce less, stabilizing agriculture. Reform rewired finance. Glass-Steagall separated banking. The FDIC ensured deposits, restoring faith in banks. Social Security created pensions, unemployment insurance, and aid for children. Elsewhere, hardship fueled extremism. In Germany, crisis and humiliation opened the door to Nazis. Demagogues offered simple answers and scapegoats. 1933 set two paths: reform at home, dictatorship abroad. Fascism consolidated in Italy. Militarists in Japan pushed imperial expansion. Severe, prolonged hardship can corrode democracy and invite repression and war. Nearly a century later, warning signs feel familiar. High wealth and income inequality can breed social friction. Debt is higher across the board, a source of growth and vulnerability. Shocks can trigger cascading defaults, as before. Polarization and populist anger echo the 1930s. Differences matter. Safety nets exist. Central banks act faster. Information moves instantly. Protect ordinary people. Credible deposit insurance deters runs. Safety nets stabilize demand in recessions. Avoid protectionism. Cooperation and open, rules-based trade support resilience. Act quickly in crises. Inject liquidity, guarantee, and stimulate when needed. Invest in infrastructure and people. Relief now. Productivity later. The Great Depression is not a prophecy. It is a cautionary tale. Its ingredients still exist. Human fear and greed endure, so vigilance is essential. Protect stabilizing institutions. Resist protectionism. Strengthen cooperation. Demand evidence-based leadership. Behind every statistic are human lives and dignity. History can be our teacher.